Suspiria wasn't just a horror movie, it was a full-blown sensory assault, a fever dream painted in violent primary colors and whispered threats. It was an opera of terror, a baroque nightmare designed not merely to tell a story, but to shatter your nerves and rewire your brain. But behind the stained glass madness and the shrieking prog rock soundtrack, the film's creation was just as bizarre, just as meticulous, and just as unhinged as the psychedelic nightmare it projected onto the screen. The director waged sonic warfare on his own actors to elicit genuine terror. Its legendary, blood-curdling score was written by a band who had never even seen the film, and one of its most iconic, terrifying scenes was inspired by a real-life family story that, in a final twist of irony, may have been a complete fabrication. These are 20 weird facts about Suspiria, and hidden deep in its corridors of chaos is a film that didn't just scare audiences, it weaponized cinema itself. Some nightmares whisper, this one screams. Number 1. It was a grim fairy tale, and when director Dario Argento first imagined it, the characters were even younger, far more vulnerable. The original script, co-written with his then-partner and frequent collaborator Dario Nicolodi, centered on a prestigious dance academy for girls between the tender ages of 8 and 12. Argento and Nicolodi were deeply fascinated by the dramatic, almost primal potential of placing small children in the path of extreme supernatural danger. They drew inspiration from the darkest corners of European folklore and children's literature, the disorienting dread of Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, the hidden malevolence of Bluebeard, and the sinister, candy-coated traps of the Brothers Grimm. They envisioned a world where the innocence of youth collided head-on with ancient, unknowable evil. However, the film's producers and financiers balked at the idea. In the conservative climate of the 1970s, subjecting a cast of children to such graphic, unrelenting, and psychologically disturbing horror was commercial suicide. They feared the film would be instantly banned in multiple countries, impossible to market, and a magnet for controversy. So, Argento was forced to compromise. He aged the characters up to their late teens and early 20s, making them young women on the cusp of adulthood. But here's the crucial, brilliant twist. He kept the script almost entirely the same. The dialogue remained simple, direct, and often startlingly childlike. The logic of the plot remained dreamlight and naive, unburdened by adult cynicism. This singular decision created an eerie, profoundly unsettling quality, where adult women speak and behave with a disarming simplicity, navigating a world that feels menacingly too big for them. To amplify this subconscious effect, Argento instructed his set designer Giuseppe Bassan to intentionally place the doorknobs on the sets unnervingly high, often at the actor's eye level. This subtle, almost invisible choice subliminally forces the audience to perceive these adult women as small, vulnerable children, lost and dwarfed in a terrifying, oversized storybook world controlled by malevolent giants. Number 2. A Disney nightmare. Argento had a singular, shocking, and utterly radical vision for the film's look. He had no interest in the gritty realism or shadowy chiaroscuro that defined so much of 1970s horror. He wanted the exact opposite. He wanted the color palette of Walt Disney's groundbreaking 1937 animated classic, Snow White. He instructed his cinematographer, the brilliant Luciano Tovoli, to meticulously study the animated masterpiece, aiming to reproduce its intensely saturated primary colors, its bold storybook reds, its deep magical blues, and its poison apple greens. Argento famously explained, "We were trying to reproduce the color of Walt Disney's Snow White. It has been said from the beginning that Technicolor lacked subdued shades, was without nuances, like cutout cartoons." His goal was to create a violent, terrifying fairy tale for adults, and it started by hijacking the visual language of the most beloved children's classic of all time. The result is a world that feels both completely artificial and hyper-real, where every frame is a painterly, breathtaking composition of lurid, aggressive color that seems to bleed off the screen and stain the viewer's mind. The comfort of Disney was twisted into the fabric of a nightmare. Number 3. The Ghost in the Machine. The film's legendary, impossibly saturated look wasn't a digital trick or a simple filter. It was a complex and dying form of cinematic alchemy, a chemical process that was already a relic by the mid-1970s. Argento and Tovoli shot on standard Eastman Kodak film stock, but the real magic, the source of its otherworldly vibrancy, happened in post-production. Argento insisted on using one of the last remaining fully operational 3-strip Technicolor dye transfer machines in Rome to print the final film. This was an expensive, laborious, and almost obsolete process that involved creating 3 separate black and white negatives from the original color negative. Each of these 3 negatives corresponded to one of the primary colors, cyan, magenta, and yellow. These were then used to transfer pure, undiluted dye directly onto the final celluloid, one color at a time. This meticulous process allowed them to achieve impossibly rich, stable, and vibrant colors with a purity and intensity that modern digital coloring still struggles to replicate. Suspiria became one of the very last feature films in history to be processed this way, essentially capturing the ghost of Hollywood's golden age to paint a modern, unparalleled masterpiece of horror. Number 4. A Blind Score. The haunting, chiming, and utterly terrifying soundtrack by the Italian progressive rock band Goblin is as iconic as the film's visuals, and an indispensable part of its very DNA. But here's the astonishing secret behind its creation. They wrote and recorded the vast majority of it without ever seeing a single single frame of the movie. Argento, who had previously collaborated with them on his Jolly-O-Master Deep Red, approached them with a unique proposition. Instead of having them score to finished footage, he described the film's mood, its key plot points, and its overarching nightmarish atmosphere to them in vivid, exhaustive detail. Based entirely on his verbal vision, the band locked themselves away and composed the score. For months, they experimented with a bizarre and eclectic collection of strange and exotic instruments, including a Greek bouzouki, a long-necked mandolin whose chiming notes form the main theme, African tabla drums, a celesta, and a massive, room-sized Moog modular synthesizer, to create a sound that felt simultaneously ancient and alien, ritualistic and futuristic. The result is a score that doesn't just accompany the film, it anticipates it, creating a palpable sense of dread that haunts the audience long before the true horror ever appears on screen. Number 5. Sonic Warfare. Argento didn't just want the music to scare the audience, he wanted it to genuinely, viscerally terrify his own actors. The Italian film industry of the era had a standard practice that gave directors an unusual degree of freedom on set. Films were shot without recording sound. All dialogue, sound effects, and music were added in post-production, a process known as looping or dubbing. Argento exploited this technical convention to create a unique and deeply unsettling atmosphere during filming. He blasted Goblin's terrifying, cacophonous, and relentlessly percussive score at full, deafening volume from massive speakers on the set while the cameras were rolling. The actors' unnerved expressions, their widened, fearful eyes, and their palpable jittery anxiety weren't just a performance. They were a real, visceral reaction to the relentless sonic assault. It was a clever, if cruel, psychological trick that Argento used to pull authentic, primal fear directly from his performers, forcing them to inhabit the film's terror rather than simply act it. Number 6. The Babel Effect. The film's strange, slightly off, and subtly dislocated dialogue isn't an accident or a flaw. It's a direct byproduct of the international co-production model prevalent in European filmmaking in the 1970s. The cast was a melting pot of American, Italian, and German actors, including Hollywood legend Joan Bennett, German cult star Udo Kier, and Italian actress Alida Valli. On set, these performers often spoke their own native languages during scenes. The American lead, Jessica Harper, would deliver her lines in English, while another actor in the very same take might respond in German or Italian. All of this mismatched audio was then looped and dubbed into the various required languages for international release. This process, while standard at the time, created a subtle but powerful sense of disorientation and emotional detachment. The words never seemed to perfectly sync with the mouth movements or the emotional intent, making the whole film feel like a strange, unsettling dream where true communication is always just slightly out of sync and just beyond reach. Number 7. A Grandmother's Tale. Or was it? The narrative seed of the story came from co-writer Daria Nicolodi. She told Argento a chilling and supposedly true story that her grandmother, a French-born concert pianist named Yvonne Muller-Loeb-Cassatt, had shared with her when she was a young girl. The story went that her grandmother, as a teenager, had once attended a prestigious music and arts academy located on the border between Germany and Switzerland. During her time there, she became increasingly convinced that the school was a front, and that the teachers were not practicing music but black magic. The experience supposedly terrified her so much that she fled the school in the middle of the night and never returned. This eerie, personal anecdote, according to Nicolodi, was the core inspiration for the film's Coven-run dance academy. However, in a fascinating twist that adds another layer of myth to the film's strange origins, Argento publicly claimed in later years that Nicolodi had completely fabricated the entire story, inventing it to make the film's genesis sound more mysterious and compelling. The truth remains unknown, lost in the fog of their personal and professional history. Number 8. The Mother of Sighs. The film's elaborate and sinister mythology wasn't just invented out of thin air for a horror movie. It was pulled from the dense, opium-fueled, and lyrical prose of an 1845 essay by the English writer Thomas de Quincey, titled Suspiria de Profundis, which translates from Latin to Sighs from the Depths. In a haunting section of this work, de Quincey imagines 3 ancient primordial sorrows, or mothers, who serve as the dark companions to humanity's suffering: Mater Suspiriorum, the Mother of Sighs; Mater Tenebrarum, the Mother of Darkness; and Mater Lacrimarum, the Mother of Tears. Argento and Nicolodi seized upon this Gothic literary concept and used it as the foundational blueprint for their thematic Three Mothers trilogy of films. Suspiria serves as the story of the first and oldest of these demonic matriarchs, the Mother of Sighs, whose true name is revealed to be the ancient and powerful witch Helena Marcos. Number 9. The Reluctant Star. Jessica Harper was cast in the demanding lead role of the American ballet student Susie Bannion after Argento saw her captivating and charismatic performance in Brian De Palma's cult rock opera Phantom of the Paradise. He was immediately struck by her large, expressive, almost doll-like eyes, which he felt looked like they belonged to a character from a Japanese manga comic, innocent, wide, and capable of conveying immense terror. To take the role in Argento's strange Italian horror film, Harper famously turned down a significant part in Woody Allen's Oscar-winning romantic comedy classic Annie Hall. It was a career-defining choice, a decision to step away from a path of mainstream American success and instead dive headfirst into the surreal, violent, and unforgettable world of European art horror. Number 10. Hollywood royalty's final bow. The role of the sinister, elegant, and ultimately duplicitous headmistress Madame Blanc was the final feature film appearance for the legendary Hollywood actress Joan Bennett. A major star of the 1930s and 40s, known for her iconic femme fatale roles in a series of dark, atmospheric film noirs directed by Fritz Lang, Bennett's presence lent the film a strange and powerful sense of old-world gravitas and menace. Her A-list career had been famously derailed by a major Hollywood scandal in the 1950s, but she found a resurgence in late-career success on the Gothic television soap opera Dark Shadows. Despite her personal reservations about the script's graphic and extreme violence, her husband, an admirer of Argento's earlier work, passionately urged her to take the part. Her chilling and memorable performance ultimately earned her a Saturn Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress. Number 11. The Maggot Rain. One of the film's most skin-crawling, repulsive, and unforgettable scenes, where spoiled food in the Academy's attic causes thousands of maggots to rain from the ceiling down onto the students' hair and beds, was horrifyingly, disgustingly real. Instead of relying on special effects or props, the production crew dumped thousands of live, writhing maggots directly onto the cast for the close-up shots, capturing their genuine disgust and horror on camera. However, for the wider, more epic shots that needed to show the sheer volume of the disgusting infestation, they switched to a less stomach-churning alternative, dropping thousands upon thousands of grains of rice from above to simulate the falling worms. Number 12. The Voice of the Witch.
Vuoi uccidermi? Vorresti uccidere Elena Marcos?
Raspy, dying breaths, guttural croaks, and final terrifying shriek of the ancient, largely unseen witch, Helena Marcos, were performed by none other than Daria Nicolodi, the film's co-writer and Argento's creative partner. And in another stroke of strange on-the-fly casting, the uncredited 90-year-old woman who physically portrayed the decrepit, monstrous, and rotting witch at the film's violent climax was not a professional actress at all. Argento reportedly spotted her by chance on the streets of Rome and, struck by her unforgettable, time-worn face, cast her on the spot, believing she was the perfect physical embodiment of a sorceress who had lived for centuries. Number 13. A Room of Razors. The agonizingly slow, brutal, and almost unwatchable death of Susie's inquisitive friend, Sarah, who flees her unseen pursuer only to fall into a room inexplicably filled from floor to ceiling with razor wire, is one of horror cinema's most infamous and wince-inducing set pieces. While the wire used on set wasn't actually barbed for safety reasons, the sharp, coiled metal still constantly pinched, snagged, and painfully scraped actress Stefania Cassini during the multiple takes required to film the scene. Her on-screen agony, her desperate struggles, and her raw terror were made painfully real by the genuine physical discomfort of the ordeal. Number 14. The Invisible Director. Dario Argento often makes Alfred Hitchcock-style cameo appearances in his films, but unlike Hitchcock, he rarely shows his face. Instead, he inserts himself through a signature trademark that runs through almost all of his movies. The black-gloved hands of the killer are almost always his own. In Suspiria, the hands that brutally stab the young student Pat Hingle repeatedly, drag her across the floor, and smash her face through a stained glass window in the shocking and operatic opening murder scene belong to the director himself. It's a directorial flourish that allows him to literally insert his own hand into the film's stylized, beautiful, and shocking violence. Number 15. The Studio's Fear. When the powerful American studio 20th Century Fox was set to distribute the film in the United States, their marketing department was gripped with anxiety. The studio's own film, Star Wars, had just been released and had become a global, family-friendly cultural phenomenon of unprecedented scale. The executives were terrified of releasing something as surreal, artistic, graphically violent, and morally ambiguous as Suspiria under its main prestigious corporate brand. To protect their carefully cultivated reputation and avoid any potential backlash, they created a short-lived, largely forgotten subsidiary label called International Classics, specifically to release the film. This corporate maneuver effectively distanced the official 20th Century Fox name from Argento's controversial and undeniable masterpiece of terror. Number 16. The Confused Critics. Upon its initial release, many mainstream film critics of the day simply didn't know what to make of Suspiria. They lavished praise on its stunning, unique, and undeniable visual style, but almost universally dismissed the story as weak, nonsensical, underdeveloped, or secondary to the spectacle. The legendary and influential critic Gene Siskel famously called it a weak imitation of The Exorcist, but they had missed the point entirely. They were judging it by the standards of conventional narrative-driven horror, when Argento was creating something else entirely. In Suspiria, the traditional logic of the narrative is deliberately subservient to the pure associative logic of a nightmare. The overpowering, hallucinatory, and unforgettable style is the substance. Number 17. The Unfilmed Secret. An entire subplot that would have recontextualized one of the main supporting characters and added another layer of paranoia to the plot was left on the cutting room floor. In the original screenplay, the abrasive, confrontational, and seemingly suspicious student Olga, played by Italian actress Barbara Magnolfi, was eventually revealed to be one of the witches themselves. She wasn't an antagonist to Susie, but a recruiter, actively and secretly trying to test Susie's strength and character to see if she was worthy of being initiated initiated into the coven. A scene explicitly revealing her true nature was written, but for reasons of budget, pacing, or both, was never actually filmed. Number 18. The architectural horror. The Tanz Dance Academy itself is a living, breathing character in the film, a labyrinth of impossible geometry, oppressive color, and hidden passages. The building's striking bright red exterior was actually a temporary facade built on a studio lot, but its design was modeled directly on a real historic Gothic landmark in Freiburg, Germany, known as the Haus zum Walfisch, or Whale House. The impossible, geometrically nightmarish interiors, however, were constructed entirely on a soundstage in Rome. The set designer, Giuseppe Bassan, was instructed by Argento to create spaces that would evoke the unsettling, gravity-defying, and perspective-twisting art of the Dutch graphic artist M.C. Escher, whose famous prints of impossible staircases and repeating patterns can be seen hanging on the Academy's walls. Number 19. The Cult Awakens. Much like the subject of the provided sample script, Office Space, Suspiria was not an immediate mainstream blockbuster. It performed reasonably well in Europe, but failed to make a major commercial impact in the United States. But it found its true, devoted, and lifelong audience over time, in the dark. It became a sensation at midnight movie screenings and on home video formats like VHS and DVD, where viewers could fully and repeatedly immerse themselves in its overwhelming sensory experience without the distractions of a restless multiplex audience. Its reputation grew not in mainstream theaters, but in darkened living rooms, college dorms, and repertory cinemas, passed from one horror aficionado, punk rocker, and art student to another like a secret, forbidden, and mind-altering text. Number 20. The Sound of Gibberish. The creepy, unsettling, and seemingly demonic whispers that haunt Goblin's unforgettable main theme aren't ancient curses, demonic incantations, or snippets of reverse dialogue. They're just nonsense. The band's keyboardist and leader, Claudio Simonetti, has admitted in multiple interviews that most of the eerie whispers he recorded for the track were simply him and other band members murmuring random, nonsensical gibberish into a microphone. The words were meant to create a sinister and ritualistic mood, to sound like a language you almost understand but don't, rather than to convey any literal occult message. Suspiria didn't just tell a story of witchcraft, it cast a spell. It's a relentless, beautiful, and profoundly terrifying film that uses color, sound, and atmosphere not as tools to tell a story, but as the story itself. It threw out the entire rulebook of horror filmmaking and proved with every perfectly composed and blood-soaked frame that nightmares don't have to make sense to feel terrifyingly, unforgettably real. If this one ever stained your dreams, even just for a moment, drop a comment. Tell us what horror masterpiece we should dissect next, because some movies just want to scare you. Others want to crawl inside your head and redecorate.